Look at the space around you right now. Perhaps you are sitting in a quiet room, the only light reflecting from the screen, where your eyes are glued to strangers endlessly running after a ball. Why do we now choose to sit perfectly still, gnawing on tension, letting our heart rate spike in a completely passive body? And why, thousands of years ago, did your ancestors risk their lives, charging at each other in the middle of a dusty dirt field just to fight over a stuffed animal skin? If you have ever wondered what invisible force turned a life-and-death ancient game into a psychological manipulation machine for billions of modern people, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel so we can decode this together. Stay with me until the very last seconds, because the truth about the origin of the ball beneath your feet will completely change how you view those weekend peak matches. Let us travel back in time over 2,000 years to witness the world of our ancestors, where the ball was not a luxury entertainment tool, but a part of survival instinct. Imagine you are a soldier under the Han Dynasty, around the year 206 before Christ. After grueling hours of training with swords and spears, you are not allowed to rest. You are pushed into an empty dirt field with dozens of other soldiers. Your mission is to use your bare feet, control a hand-stitched leather ball stuffed with hair and animal fur, and try to kick it through a small hole in a silk cloth hanging high between two bamboo poles. This game was called cuju. In the Book of Han, historians described cuju as a mandatory exercise in the military. For a cavalryman, mastering the ball with their feet was not for show, but the only way to train their footwork agility, their balance on horseback, and their lightning-fast reflexes against enemy arrows. If you collapsed on the cuju field from exhaustion, you would understand that you could hardly survive on a real battlefield. The ball at this moment was the fine line between life and death. But humans did not only use the ball for war. In another corner of the world, our ancestors used it to seek absolute connection. Around the 7th century, at ancient temples in Japan, another variation of the ball was born with the name kamari. Imagine a completely different atmosphere. No screaming or fighting, no lethal confrontation. You and 5 or 6 others, wearing baggy ceremonial robes, stand in a circle under the shade of a maple tree. The group's task is to use feet, knees, or shoulders to keep the deerskin ball suspended in the air. Anthropological researcher Alan Gutman once analyzed that kamari had no concept of winners or losers, no scoreboards, and no end time. The game only stopped when everyone was exhausted but smiling. The essence of the ball at this time was an invisible spiritual thread, where the survival of the collective depended on the uplifting support of each individual. Your ancestors played the ball to learn how to harmonize with their peers in the universe. However, when the ball rolled to Europe in the Middle Ages, it took on a completely chaotic and primal appearance. That was the game of mob football in the English countryside. Imagine a village festival in the 12th century. All the men in the village, from strong youths to middle-aged men, gathered in full force. The ball at this time was often a giant animal bladder. Your team's goal was, at all costs, to make that ball touch the church door of the opposing village, a few miles away. There were no rules. People were allowed to pull shirts, trip each other, wrestle, and even trample on each other amidst the muddy puddles. English historical records also noted that these chaotic matches were so violent that countless people suffered severe injuries, broken limbs, or even perished right on the grass. Many English kings, such as King Edward II, had to issue decrees banning this game because it caused social turmoil. Why were they so crazy about such a dangerous game? The answer lies in the behavioral psychology of ancient humans. Agricultural life at that time was extremely harsh and monotonous. People had to face the pressure of survival, the suppression of the ruling class, and the constant fear of natural disasters. The chaotic weekend football match was the only pressure relief valve. It was the place where they released all their primal energy, screamed, engaged in direct physical contact, and felt the hot blood flowing through their veins. When your ancestors rushed into the battle for that ball, they were not watching a performance. They were the performance. They used their entire bodies, their pain, and even their lives to interact directly with those around them. They did not need a screen to know the world was moving, because the world was the mud beneath their feet, and tribal connection was established through every bruise on their flesh. But that sweat and blood-soaked wildness could not last forever. As steam engines began to roar and factory chimneys stained the European sky black, The rhythm of our ancestors' lives was forced into a new framework. The Industrial Revolution not only changed how humans worked, but it also reshaped how we entertained ourselves. On a December afternoon in the year 1863 in London, representatives of various clubs sat down together to give birth to the Football Association. On the surface, they talked about creating a fair set of rules. But deep down in history, those rules were a mandatory requirement of the industrial age. Capitalist bosses could not accept that masses of their workers were absent from the factory on Monday mornings, simply because of brutal injuries from a village football match. Wild football to them was a waste of labor. Therefore, the ball had to be tamed. The space for movement was locked inside quiet, rectangular chalk lines. The playing time was strictly limited by the whistle and the ticking clock. People were no longer allowed to use their hands to wrestle or instinctively take each other down. From an energy-releasing ritual of an entire land, it turned into an organized, disciplined, and controlled sport. Your ancestors had to trade their wild freedom for a game that followed the rules, fitting the obedience of a modern society. And once the ball was tamed, it was ready to become the center of a massive manipulation machine. The shift from muddy puddles to meticulously manicured lawns prepared for the greatest turning point in the year 1930 in the country of Uruguay. Under the macro vision of a French president, the first World Cup in human history officially opened. This event was not simply a sports tournament. From an anthropological perspective, that was when humanity officially drew a giant boundary, dividing the world into two isolated halves. One half consisted of extremely few individuals standing under the blinding light of the stadium. The other half was tens of thousands, and later billions, standing in the dark to admire. Those people running on the grass in Uruguay in 1930 were no longer your local blacksmith or the butcher at the end of the village. They were selected elites, paid to represent a nation, to sweat and physically collide on behalf of those who could no longer run. That was a historical transition. Football, from a direct physical activity where everyone was an insider, entered the era of global professionalization and commercialization. That industry quietly stripped the ball from the feet of the crowd, placed it on a dazzling stage, and turned us into observers. We voluntarily stepped back behind the fence, surrendering the privilege of movement and the vitality of muscles to strangers. And from that very moment, a new syndrome of the era began to sprout. The consequence of that massive separation is what we are silently enduring every day in quiet rooms. From the perspective of behavioral science, this is an evolutionary mismatch. A spectacular trick played on your own biological body. Try to observe yourself while watching a tense knockout match. Your eyes are glued to the screen without blinking. Your brain, a machine programmed millions of years ago to react to the life and death boundaries of the tribe, immediately releases a flood of adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure climbs, your breathing becomes as rapid as when your ancestors held spears and rushed into the enemy's encirclement on the muddy field. But there is a core and cruel discrepancy. Your body right now is locked, sitting motionless on a soft sofa. Not a single physical drop of sweat is wrung out to survive. Not a single muscle fiber is activated to release the massive amount of energy exploding within your veins. You are going through all the extreme tension of a battle, yet completely denying the movement part. Our biological mechanism is deceived. We trap ourselves in a state of passive tension, only to receive neurological exhaustion and emptiness after the final whistle, instead of the complete refreshment of a body that has just been drained of its strength. The modern world always knows how to soothe. It offers us another illusion, more magnificent and sophisticated, which is the illusion of connection. We delude ourselves that staying up all night, watching the World Cup with billions of others, is the pinnacle of community spirit. We put on vibrant jerseys, shouting a meaningless sound together when the ball tears the net. But if you are quiet enough to look back, who are we really connecting with? For the most part, you are just sitting alone in the dark, conversing with flashing pixels. The ancient ball used to be a sacred tool for people to touch each other, wrestle with each other, to feel the direct heat and heartbeat of their fellow humans. Yet today, it has turned into a cold glass wall. It separates you from reality. You are sharing a collective hallucination with millions of strangers whose faces you have never known, and pouring all of your most primal, bonding love into 11 people running on the field, people who have absolutely no idea of your existence in this world. Of course, we cannot deny the exquisite values that modern football brings. The evolution of this game has given humanity an art form that sublimates on the green grass. The World Cup is perhaps one of the rare moments when the world agrees to put aside conflicts, lower sharp weapons, to turn together toward a circle rolling on the stadium. It is a great beauty of civilization, a symbol of global solidarity that no previous era has ever achieved. But on the opposite side of that, splendor is a quiet trade-off. The price of extreme professionalization and commercialism is that we have lost the most primal soul of the game. We have voluntarily surrendered the privilege of movement, stripped away the joy of sweating, of colliding and blending with the dust and dirt, to a small group of people paid to do it for us. From entities craving physical connection, we accept shrinking ourselves into people who find amusement by watching others live intensely. Your ancestors chased the ball to prove they were alive, while we today sit and watch the ball roll to temporarily forget that we are slowly draining our vitality. If this perspective evokes in you any thought about how we are operating our current lives, subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us. Other profound contents are still waiting for you to discover ahead, stories that our team has traded for many sleepless nights of research to bring to you.